The year was 79 CE, and on what would become the most famous day in ancient history, the people of Pompeii woke up thinking it would be just another ordinary morning. They had no idea that by sunset their entire world would be buried under 20 feet of volcanic ash. What you're about to hear isn't the story you learned in school about emperors and gladiators. This is the real story of what regular people were doing when Mount Vesuvius exploded, and how their final moments reveal secrets about Roman life that scholars are still discovering today. The evidence comes from the bodies themselves, perfectly preserved by the volcanic ash that killed them. Each frozen figure tells a story about how ordinary Romans actually lived, worked, and died. And what these stories reveal about daily life in the Roman Empire will completely change how you think about the ancient world. Picture Pompeii on the morning of August 24th, 79 CE. A bustling commercial city of about 20,000 people. Not the marble monument to imperial power that you see in movies, but a gritty, crowded working-class town where most people lived in cramped apartments and earned their living through hard physical labor. The streets were narrow and dirty, filled with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, children playing games, and the constant noise of construction as the city rebuilt from earthquake damage that had been ongoing for years. The first thing that strikes modern visitors to Pompeii is how small everything was. The houses, the shops, even the people themselves. The average Roman was about 5 feet tall, significantly shorter than modern humans. And they lived in spaces that would seem impossibly cramped by today's standards. Most families shared single rooms, sleeping on straw mattresses, with no privacy and minimal possessions. But the morning of August 24th started like any other. At dawn, the bakers were already at work. The evidence shows that several bakeries had fresh loaves still in their ovens when the eruption began. Perfectly preserved round breads marked with the baker's stamp. These weren't the fluffy white loaves we know today. Roman bread was dense, dark, and often mixed with whatever cheap ingredients were available. Beans, acorns, even sawdust when grain was scarce. In the Forum, the city's commercial heart was coming alive. Merchants were setting up their stalls, displaying everything from exotic spices brought by ship from India to locally made pottery and metalwork. But the real action was happening in the Thermopolium, ancient fast food joints where working people grabbed quick meals. The preserved remains show counters with large ceramic jars built right into them, containing ready-to-eat stews, soups, and wine. One particularly fascinating discovery was made in a Thermopolium near the city center. Archaeologists found the remains of a meal that was being prepared when Vesuvius erupted. Duck bone, fish, snails, and what appears to be an early version of paella, still sitting in the cooking pot. The owner, a woman named Julia Felix, according to election graffiti on the walls, was apparently experimenting with recipes that combined local ingredients with exotic imports. But perhaps the most revealing evidence comes from the city's working districts, where people were going about their daily jobs when disaster struck. In the Follonica of Stephanus, a laundry and textile finishing shop, workers were found at their stations, still holding the tools of their trade. These weren't slaves working in miserable conditions, but skilled craftsmen who took pride in their work. The shop had advanced equipment for cleaning and dyeing cloth, and the workers had been experimenting with new techniques for creating luxury fabrics. The fullers, as these textile workers were called, used some of the most sophisticated chemistry of the ancient world. They processed cloth using a combination of human urine, imported alkali from Egypt, and various plant-based dyes. The smell would have been overwhelming, but the results were fabrics that could compete with silk from China or cotton from India. These workers were essentially running ancient chemical laboratories, and they were well paid for their expertise. In another part of the city, archaeologists discovered a gladiator school, but not the brutal training ground you might expect. The evidence suggests this was more like a modern sports academy, with comfortable living quarters, a sophisticated medical facility, and even a swimming pool. The gladiators found there weren't desperate slaves fighting to the death, but professional athletes who enjoyed celebrity status and significant income from their performances. One of the most poignant discoveries was in the gladiator school's medical room, where a doctor was apparently treating an injured fighter when the eruption began. Surgical instruments were found laid out on a table, along with medicines and bandages. The Romans had developed remarkably advanced medical knowledge, including surgical techniques that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for over 1,000 years. But the real revelation about Roman society comes from the homes themselves and what people were doing in their final moments. In a modest house near the amphitheater, a family was found gathered around their dining table, but they weren't eating. They were counting money. The coins scattered around their bodies suggest they were small-time merchants or craftspeople, carefully calculating their earnings and planning future purchases. The family included 2 adults and 3 children, and the evidence suggests they had been living quite comfortably. Their house had running water, decorative wall paintings, and a small garden where they grew their own vegetables. This wasn't wealth by Roman standards, but it was a lifestyle that would have been envied by most people in the ancient world. These were members of what we might recognize as a middle class, something historians once thought didn't exist in ancient Rome. In the wealthy district near the Forum, a different picture emerges. In the house of the Veti, 2 brothers who had made their fortune in the wine trade were entertaining guests when Vesuvius erupted. The evidence suggests an elaborate dinner party was in progress, with multiple courses, expensive imported wines, and entertainment provided by musicians and dancers. The wealth on display was staggering. Gold jewelry, silver serving dishes, exotic foods from across the Mediterranean. But even more interesting than their wealth was how they had acquired it. The Veti brothers weren't born into aristocratic families. They were freedmen, former slaves who had earned their liberty and then built successful businesses. Their house was decorated with frescoes celebrating commerce and trade, including explicit images that celebrated fertility and prosperity. They were proud of their achievements, and they wanted everyone to know how they had earned their success. The sexual attitudes revealed in Pompeii's art and graffiti are particularly shocking to modern viewers. The Romans had a completely different relationship with sexuality than later Christian societies. Explicit images weren't hidden away. They were displayed proudly in homes, shops, and public spaces. Graffiti on walls included everything from love poems to crude sexual boasts, suggesting a society that was remarkably open about physical relationships. But perhaps the most fascinating insights come from the women of Pompeii, whose lives were far more complex than traditional histories suggest. In one house, archaeologists found a woman who was clearly running her own business, importing and selling luxury goods from Egypt and the Far East. Her storage rooms contained exotic perfumes, precious stones, and silk fabrics worth enormous sums. She had achieved financial independence in a male-dominated society, and she had done it through intelligence and hard work rather than marriage or inheritance. Another woman was found in what appears to have been an ancient beauty salon, surrounded by cosmetics, perfumes, and hairstyling tools. The Romans, both men and women, were obsessed with personal grooming. They had developed sophisticated cosmetics using ingredients from around the world, lead-based face powders, kohl eyeliner from Egypt, and hair dyes that could create almost any color imaginable. This woman was apparently a beauty professional, serving wealthy clients who were willing to pay premium prices for her expertise. The children's lives revealed in Pompeii are equally fascinating. In one house, toys were found scattered around a playroom, dolls with movable arms and legs, miniature chariots and horses, board games that required strategy and skill. Roman children weren't just small adults. They had their own culture, their own entertainment, and their own concerns. Graffiti scratched by children into walls shows they were learning to read and write, practicing mathematics, and even composing poetry. But the eruption also caught people in moments of crisis that reveal the darker side of Roman society. In the gladiator school, 13 bodies were found chained together in what appears to have been a prison cell. These were likely criminals or prisoners of war who were being trained as fighters. Their final moments suggest they were trying to escape, but were trapped by their bonds when the ash began to fall. Near the harbor, bodies were found that tell the story of people trying to flee by sea. Entire families loaded down with their most precious possessions. Jewelry, coins, and portable valuables were discovered on what had been the beach. They had made it to the water's edge but couldn't escape the toxic gases that preceded the ashfall. Their final moments were spent protecting their children, even when they knew there was no hope of survival. The timeline of the disaster reveals just how quickly everything changed. The first earthquake warnings began around noon, but most people ignored them. Earthquakes were common in the region, and life had continued normally through countless smaller tremors. It wasn't until early afternoon that the mountain exploded with unprecedented violence, sending a column of ash and debris 15 miles into the sky. For the first few hours, many Pompeians thought they could wait out the eruption. They retreated into their homes, covered their faces with cloth, and hoped the ash would stop falling. But as the hours passed and the ash continued to accumulate, roofs began to collapse under the weight. People were trapped in their houses, and toxic gases made breathing impossible. The evidence shows that different people made different choices about how to spend their final hours. Some gathered with their families, seeking comfort in familiar surroundings. Others tried to escape, loading wagons with possessions and heading for the city gates. A few seemed to have spent their time trying to save others. Bodies were found in positions suggesting they died while attempting rescues. One of the most moving discoveries was a mother and child found in the garden of the fugitives. The woman was lying on her side, one arm stretched protectively over a small figure. Her final act had been to shield her child from the falling ash, even though they both knew it was hopeless. It's a moment that speaks to the universal human experience of love and sacrifice, transcending the centuries that separate us from these ancient people. But perhaps the most important revelation from Pompeii is how remarkably similar these people were to us. They worried about money. They cared about their appearance. They argued with their neighbors. They fell in love. They struggled to raise their children. They dreamed of better lives. The Romans weren't exotic ancient people living in a world we can't understand. They were human beings dealing with the same fundamental challenge that people face today. The preservation of their final day has given us an unparalleled window into how ordinary people actually lived in the ancient world. Not the idealized version presented in official art and literature, but the messy, complicated, deeply human reality of daily life in the Roman Empire. Their stories remind us that history isn't just about emperors and wars. It's about regular people trying to make the best of whatever circumstance they find themselves in. The tragedy of Pompeii wasn't just that so many people died. It was that so many lives full of hopes, dreams, and possibilities were cut short in a single day. Every body found in the ash represents someone who had plans for the future, relationships they cared about, work they wanted to finish. The randomness of their fate, the way disaster struck without warning, reminds us how fragile human civilization really is. But their preservation has also given them a kind of immortality. 2,000 years later, we can still see exactly how they lived, what they ate, what they wore, how they spent their time. Their final day has become a permanent record of human experience, a reminder that people in every age have faced uncertainty with courage, love, and determination to make their lives matter. If stories about how ordinary people lived through extraordinary times fascinate you, subscribe to The Grey Hour for more explorations of the human experiences that shaped history. Because sometimes the most important lessons come not from studying great events, but from understanding how regular people face the challenges of their daily lives.